GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today at growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got a new mentor to GrowCFO with me, Hugh Watchorn. Hugh, welcome to the GrowCFO show.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Hugh, can you tell our audience just a little bit about your background, please?
Certainly, pretty traditional start. I went to university at the LSE, and from there I went to Arthur Andersen to train as a chartered accountant. Realised that I didn't want to be a big firm auditing type of accountant, and I wanted to work in smaller SME entrepreneurial businesses. So I left having qualified and joined a small wine merchant in North London, which I loved, and that's where I cut my commercial teeth, and moved out of there via other companies into luxury goods, consumer goods, and from there I went for the biggest part of my career was at Bonhams, who when I joined were about to merge with Phillips. And we did the merger, and then we expanded the brand via acquisition, merger, and organically across the major auction territories, which is really London, New York, and Hong Kong. But that's also via the west coast of the USA, in San Francisco and Los Angeles. So 15 years there, with all the things that come with that. One of the most striking features of that 15-year stay wasn't just the corporate finance and the treasury and the compliance and all the rest of it. It was actually the people that I met along the way, many of whom, or all of whom almost, were totally passionate about their subject areas, whether that was jewelry, motor cars, or fine art pictures. And it was that really kept me there for that long period of time. And I really loved every minute of it. I then left there 5 or so years ago, 2016. And since then, I've been self-employed, doing part-time CFO, bit of mentoring, bit of consultancy, bit of project work, all of which, again, thankfully, I'm working with some very, very different, diverse people, all of whom bring huge pluses and in some cases some minuses to the table. But it's a great thing to have, for me, to have exposure to both to their businesses, but also to them as individuals. But I spent several years during my time at Bonhams working with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, ICAEW, as part of their F10 program. I was a mentor in their team of mentors, and I had the privilege of mentoring 2 young FD/CFOs along their path towards their next steps. And interestingly, I can't say what they learned from me, but I can say that I learned a lot from them. So I'm hoping that my additional experience I've gained since doing that and my age has brought some wisdom that probably hasn't, it might have done, to enable me to be an effective and helpful mentor to the GrowCFO community.
Hugh, that sounds like some fantastic experience. And there's certainly acquisitions in there, there's mergers in there, there must be all of that post-merger integration in there. And beyond that, you're an experienced mentor already. You've done it at a top level with the ICAEW. Wow, that's quite a lot to offer. And out of those, Hugh, where would you say that your real strength lies? Where's Hugh's deepest experience?
Well, I think it's around the communication people piece. I'm very numerate. I'm not very techie. I get bored easily, would you believe? And I sometimes struggle to stay focused on things. So it's the communication of things in a hopefully clear, concise, distilled way but most of all, it's enabling, delegating, managing, sorting out people along the way. And when I say people, I mean colleagues, reports, bosses, bankers, accountants, lawyers, you name them. All that community of people is part of what I think is what is my, I hope is my, pretty powerful skill set.
To me, that's one of the big challenges of the relatively new CFO. He's been used to dealing with the finance function, heading it up, putting the numbers out and so on, and then suddenly it's kind of turned 180 degrees, and he becomes rather the inward-looking face of finance, the outward-looking face, and communications becomes his biggest challenge.
As the song says, communication let me down. If you're of a certain age, you'll know what that song is. I am of that age, by the way. It's a very good point you raise. I think there's a traditional view of financial people as being slightly screen-based, slightly introverted, possibly slightly shy, slightly wallflowery. I think that is an outdated view. And I think that, as you say, Kevin, outward communication in all its forms is integral to success as a CFO. Without it, I don't think you can really be a CFO. I don't think you can really sit at the board table or at a boardroom in the city when you're trying to transact something and not have that confidence and expertise to clearly distill what the answer or what the story is in what you're talking about. I think it's fundamental.
Absolutely. And anybody that can help you with that has to be a very welcome addition to your toolkit. And
Absolutely
for me, right, an awful lot of communication isn't about the words that you say at the time. It's about the thought process that goes together before you say them.
It's that old thing of Dr. Johnson, I think it was, but it may not be him, who said, "Apologies, my letter is so long, I didn't have time to make it shorter." It's exactly that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that it is absolutely, this is my view. People have different views on this, but my view is that less is more. And if the FD, the CFO, can distill the stuff, either verbally or through written or charts, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. The key thing is to get those messages across to people. And I think it's important people realize that human beings can soon have a saturated brain unless you limit yourself to what are really the key things. Now, that's probably blatantly obvious to everybody listening to this podcast, but I still see people trawling through gargantuan reports, which most of which won't be absorbed or taken on board, and most importantly, won't be enacted.
Yeah, you need the executive summary on the front that's no more than a page of A4, has half a dozen bullet points that tell you the key things, and then at the bottom tells you the decision that's got to be made.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. Based upon absolutely the right and most accurate data. Yeah. So every CFO's job, as they all will already know, has to ensure that the roots under the tree of the data are as solid as a rock. If they're not, everything else is built on sand and nothing else works. So all of what I'm saying assumes implicitly that the numbers upon which these reports are distilled come off correct, accurate, properly underpinned data.
So tell me a little bit more about Hugh the person. Hugh, what really gets your juices flowing?
Well, interestingly, I was I had lunch with a cousin of mine a couple of months ago, who I've not seen since 1998, quite a long time ago. I won't bore the listener with why. It was such a long gap. But she asked me the very same question, albeit in a slightly different way. And I replied that it's the combination for me of business and people. I think I passionately believe that business is great. It's powerful. It's important. Gives people purpose. Hopefully, it makes some money. It pays taxes, and so on. It's important, and it can be truly great. What makes it great are the people who work in it. However good your tech is, however good your IP is, whatever it is that you're doing so well, typically, nearly always, it's the people that drive that. And for CFOs, but not just for all people, CEOs, it is important that the people in the company are valued. And I was interested in actually in today's news, Bumble, which is a dating app, so I'm told, is given all of their staff worldwide a free paid week's holiday, because everyone is so stressed because the volumes have gone up so much during the lockdown periods. That's a nice thing. It just shows that companies, there are ways of looking after staff like that, which I think is very, very, which is terrific.
Yeah, sounds like it's more than just that on people. You were talking about all of those interesting people that you met in specialities in Bonhams and Phillips. Is it something about being surrounded by bright minds?
It's partly that, but it's probably more about the passion that they exhibited. So, the head of Asian art, passionate about a Chinese bowl he'd found in Shrewsbury, or you get in a John Lennon sign something or other, or you get in a trying to think, a piece of glass, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. It's the passion that the person has and the energy that creates. It's the energy around these people who are, and you see a bit on the Antiques Roadshow, if you watch that show on BBC TV, when an expert sees something that's really great, you can just sense in them the energy that comes out of them. So for me, that's amazing. The challenge was how I convert that passion for the object and the sale into a commercial proposition. That's very easy, because the seller pays, the buyer pays, and we have our costs, and that's the end of it. But it's not quite as simple as that. But it is trying to corral and influence and advise and mentor, whatever the verb is. But these artists, people who love these things, have to also help us make money, in the company. That's also why we're there. So there's a challenge in that. But I think whether you're in working for Timpson's or working for Bumble or working for Bonhams, having people who are bright, passionate, and energetic around you just gives you that kind of real oomph to make the days sing. And the communication we talked about earlier is key, but it's also about the communication generally, about when you meet somebody on the way into the office or on the way out of the office, you just chat about whatever you chat about. It's that as well as the actual working comms. That's all part of the same story. So, I think
business, then you're a man of a certain age that could quite easily have said, yes, I've done my however many years with Phillips and Bonhams. I've done my years of working with my own company and doing projects. You could at this moment be saying, well, I'm going to hang my hat up, find a nice deck chair somewhere, watch some cricket. What is it about business that stops you doing that?
Well, I love cricket, that's for sure. I adore watching cricket live. It's a great passion of mine, to be honest. Why? Because there's a few things. That's a good question, actually. First of all, I think for all people of all ages, purpose remains important. I think it's important to have a purpose. It could be working on your golf swing. It could be doing charitable works. It could be working in companies. It could be a whole raft. I'm not saying it should be. I'm not trying to prescribe what it is. But for me personally, one of my purposeful drivers is working for companies. I like it. So that's one bit of it. I think that whilst it's not incumbent on me, I think it's a good thing that I can, in some ways, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's not meant to be, I can repay or give some of the wisdom I've gained having worked for so many years in business to hopefully to younger people, to other people who perhaps haven't got quite that experience or perspective that I've been able to gain from it. And thirdly, without wishing to be too self-serving, I think people sometimes enjoy having the energy that I bring to a room.
Mm. That's energy. That is a fantastic gift to bring to a room, Hugh. Where do you think that energy comes from?
Well, I've always had passions for things. I bought my first record when I was probably 8 years old. My first 45 when I was 8 years old.
Come on, what was the first 45 at 8 years old?
If you must ask, it was ELO, Roll Over Beethoven. Please do not ask me what my second 45 was.
Now, come on, you've set me a challenge there. What was your second 45?
On Harvest Records, that was. It was Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll Part 2.
I've got that somewhere on vinyl in the loft as well.
Have you? Well, as an aside, I know you've seen the film The Joker, so it was a wonderful, brilliant movie. Anyway, there's a scene in that movie when he comes down the steps and they play Rock and Roll Part 2, and I'd forgotten what a great record that is. When I saw the movie, that is a great record, regardless of Gary's truly appalling crimes. But anyway, where was I? I lost track of where I was now.
We were talking passion.
Oh, passion, that's right. Energy, that's right, yeah. So I've had a passion for music since I was very young. I still have that. And I always will, God willing, till the day I die. So, and I think I'm a Welshman. I'm a Celt. I think there's something also innate in us Welshmen that gives us that passion. Like when you listen to the anthem before the Six Nations Wales games, for example. But I think that's innate. But it's also just, I think it's what we, not just being CFOs, we as people like to bring. If you're in a party or in a social scenario somewhere in a restaurant or something, people who have energy and give off that vibe are more attractive to other people, I think, in terms of, I want to go and talk to that individual because he or she has got this energy. And they could be 25 or 85. It doesn't matter how old you are, or where you're from, whatever your background is. It's that energy thing, which is terrific. Yeah, so I've got that.
Hugh, as a mentor, I could see that that's something you might look for in your mentee CFOs. But is that something that is there naturally, or is it something that can be taught?
You certainly can't teach it, but in my view, but you can influence it. I think it's like you can influence behaviors. One thing I'm really bad at is listening, because my mind goes on to something else before I've finished listening to what the other person has said. But I am listening to your questions very carefully, of course. But I've worked hard to actively listen. I've worked hard. I by no means have mastered it, but I'm a better listener than I was 10, 15 years ago. I mean, at the board meetings at Bonhams, I would, even at those places, drift off sometimes. I'd say, "What did you say? So what was the question?" So for me, it's a listening thing. So if I can learn to actively listen, which I've done to an extent, learn and be influenced and be helped with that by other people, I see no reason why people can't stand in a certain way, sit in a certain way, smile, walk around purposefully and not slouch. There's a small, perhaps silly things, but they just give off, tell people what kind of individual they're dealing with. So yeah, I can't teach anything like that, but I would like to think that I can kind of guide, influence, mold a little bit on that area for these people who are trying to move into a sort of CFO role.
So, Hugh, a passionate Welshman, Wales in the last 16 of the European Championship,
and playing Denmark on Saturday, I understand now.
Yeah. So what's the chances of Wales going on and winning the tournament, do you think?
A nil. But I think we can beat Denmark in the last 16. If we do that, I have to say it's hats off to them all, because they're a very small footballing nation, we are a very small footballing nation. So it'd be great. I'd be thrilled. But I mean, I'm also delighted that Denmark have got through, given what happened to their captain 2 weekends ago. It's great news. they came back so well and so strongly last night. I think it was last night, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I will be in front of the telly later tonight, watching England, and no doubt throwing things at television, getting disappointed at the moment as usual. And watching England is as bad as being a supporter of my local football team, Newcastle United. You just get resigned to a level of underperformance over the years and failing to reach your potential.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think England will do very well tonight. I predict Kane will score.
Yeah. So we used to have a striker back in, I'm telling my age now, he was called Malcolm MacDonald, Supermac, and he was just like Harry Kane. He always disappeared out of view when the big game came along.
But he was a great player, wasn't he? I'm not a football. Football isn't my real expert. I don't know that much about football, but I remember him being a very, very, very high performing forward, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah. But this is an interesting sort of communications dynamic, and we're recording a podcast on mentoring and CFOs and introducing you, Hugh, and we've disappeared off into the world of sport and football via a little bit of early 70s pop music, and it just shows that kind of communication dynamic, I think.
Now, here's the thing. I was in a meeting, I can't say who it was with, but suffice to say it was a potential new client for me in the middle of London, and we were talking about the business, the plans, the usual things, and on came the stereo. We're a kind of a restaurant wine bar environment where we met, and on came Miles Davis on stereo. And I thought, shall I just mention I do love Miles Davis to this guy, and I didn't, which I wish I had. And then when I wrote to him after the meeting to say, thank you for meeting me, blah, 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 I also meant to put a PS saying, I really enjoyed the music during our meeting, but I forgot to do that. That's poor communication, I think.
And I think unless you have those little bits around, you never get that sort of hook to get to a deeper relationship. You say you like Miles Davis, he says he likes Miles Davis. There's a connection on another level apart from the business. And I remember one particular client I had 3 or 4 years ago. I was working for PwC out in Saudi, and the particular director that I was dealing with, I knew that I could not go into his office and get any business done unless I had a half-hour conversation first about Manchester United.
Well, there are worse things, aren't there?
Yeah.
But isn't that humanity? Isn't that communication?
It is, absolutely.
That's what it's about, It's all about, and that's the problem with online video calls that we've had to do for the last year and a quarter or so, is that they're brilliant and very effective. Having a half an hour chat about Man U probably isn't something you would do on a video call.
No, and that's it. I found that directly last week, actually, Hugh. And my current consulting client alongside GrowCFO is NHS Digital. And we've been working with them now since probably January. But every meeting has been over Zoom. We actually had a face-to-face meeting for the first time with a client last week. And we went out for a beer afterwards.
Good for you.
And probably half an hour sitting chatting over a beer, looking folk in the eye, asking them the slightly more indirect question and watching the body language and things like that. I think we probably got more out of the session over a beer in the pub than we did out of the meeting. And you just lose that dynamic completely when you're on Zoom all the time.
All I would say, I completely agree with you 100%. All I would add is, are we two guys of a certain age just not in the zeitgeist of that kind of young millennial video calling individual?
That's an interesting question. But I think our young millennials, they like going to the pub as well.
True. Never a true word. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Hugh, on that note, that has been absolutely fascinating. And it's great to have you as part of GrowCFO and part of the mentoring team. I'm sure that there'll be many podcasts in the future where we have a further chat.
Well, thank you for having me. My first ever. I've done some interviews online before, but never a podcast. So Thank you very much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Hugh.